Welcome back to the Kayak Essentials book at bedtime, produced as part of the 2020 Cabin Fever series. In this episode, we continue the story of Nick and Matt's coast-to-coast open canoe journey across the Highlands of Scotland. Having triumphantly reached Fort William via the Knoydart Wilderness, our wandering heroes now take on the infamous challenge of Rannoch Moor. After 4 gruelling days of paddling and portaging across the Scottish Highlands from Loch Nevis to the Great Glen, Matt and I took a day's rest in Fort William, recovered the car from Mallaig via a train ride over the Harry Potter Viaduct, and reflected on our experiences. Despite completing the crossing in good time, some lessons had clearly been learned. Most seriously, the weight of our packs had severely affected our travels during the long portage through Knoydart. The trip up to the watershed from Loch Nevis had been a tough experience, heightened by the need to cover every kilometre 3 times. The answer was obvious: carry less kit. We considered every piece of equipment and stripped away all unused and unnecessary items. It was a sobering experience to see the excess material pile up before our eyes as we lined our packs for the next planned section of the trip. Although Matt's determination to manage with only 1 pair of underpants seemed a step too far for my tastes. We were determined to move more freely on this next adventure, an imposing route from Kinlochleven to Perth via Rannoch Moor, especially given the brutal reputation of the high ground across which we would travel. We skipped the enclosed sea lock section from Fort William and drove to Kinlochleven, where our journey continued. With the canoe balanced on its trolley and our packs inside the boat, we began the steep ascent up the forest track that leads to the Blackwater Reservoir. The challenge of the route was immediate and unforgiving. The unremittingly steep gradient of the rutted forest track demanded a combined effort as we strained against our makeshift harnesses. Like Iditarod huskies, we snapped and snarled as the climb out of this steep-sided valley served up the first dreadful test of the day. A lone fell runner wafted by, offering words of encouragement as we sweated onwards. After an hour of intense effort, we had gained almost 300 metres of altitude and were rewarded with a panoramic view over Kinlochleven and its tidal sea loch. The cool, cloudy weather was ideal for travel, and our progress towards the reservoir was now hastened by the smooth concrete surface of the track over which the canoe trolley sped. We revelled in the advantage this change of surface provided, and felt our spirits rise once more. The contrast with Loch Nevis was spectacular. Arriving at the dam wall by late morning, we were reassured to see a good water level in the Blackwater. A fresh westerly wind blew over the lake's surface, and we hustled to complete the transition to paddle power. With 4 days of Highland canoe wrangling under our belts, our expertise in switching from land to water was impressive. Barely 15 minutes passed between unstrapping the wheels and dipping our blades. With the sail hoisted, we flew east towards the head of the lake, enjoying a working lunch afloat. The wind blew us on at a pace, aided by our combined paddle power. I expected that the balance of paddling to portaging would be more favourable on this second leg of our Scottish Odyssey, and settled myself into the bow seat that I figured would be my home for many long hours in the coming days. It made sense that Matt, blessed as he was with greater muscle and brawn, should occupy the stern to maintain an efficient boat trim on our mainly downwind course. However, I soon began to experience an unsettling emotion that could only be described as the loneliness of the long-distance bow paddler. On open water with no important role other than to maintain forward propulsion, I strived to find a state of flow, a meditative frame of mind that would permit me to complete the next countless thousand paddle strokes in a blissful state of mindful serenity. The sound of Matt's singing abruptly shook me from my reverie. Turning back to observe him, I witnessed a picture of absorbed contentment. Between glances at the map, fine-tuning of the sail's main sheet, steering strokes to adjust our heading, and satisfied mouthfuls of energy bar, there was scarcely time for Matt to provide more than the occasional half-hearted power stroke to assist our progress. Incensed at the inequity of our division of labour and the happy existence that my companion had created, I turned back to the sensory deprivation of the bow, and with gritted teeth found my flow again. 15 kilometres dispatched in a couple of focused hours, the shoreline closed in towards the head of the lake as we zigzagged through a maze of islands in search of the tiny river that feeds the Blackwater Reservoir at its upstream end. Finally beaching the canoe, we stepped ashore into a gloriously wild and remote place. 300 metres altitude, with the Moor Mountains to the north and the peaks of Glencoe to the south, Our escape lay across almost 8 kilometres of moorland to Rannoch station. It felt that the real challenge was about to begin. Rannoch Moor has a severe reputation among expedition canoeists for its distance, terrain underfoot, and exposure. We scouted the first section and concluded that the river was deep enough to permit lining up. We hauled across a few meanders, dragged up the frequent rocky steps, and paddled wherever possible. Our portage packs remained in the canoe for much of the time, and as the hours passed, we made steady uphill progress towards the tiny, unpronounceable loch where we would cross the watershed and commence the descent to Rannoch station. The visibility remained clear, with spectacular views across the high remote moorland. The train track became visible to the north, and suddenly we were within sight of the miniature expanse of open water, across which we floated in relaxed delight. From the route's high point, we marvelled at the relative ease with which we had covered the ground. Conditions had been ideal: enough water in the river, relatively dry underfoot, and good visibility. We also felt the benefit of lighter portage packs, which permitted us to move all our equipment without resorting to multiple journeys. Nonetheless, we awarded ourselves in that moment the status of experienced expedition canoeists, with the Rannoch Moor badge of honour already metaphorically sewn to our swimming trunks. We continued towards Rannoch station, along a small stream that just floated our canoe downhill. As numerous boulder chokes forced us back onto the moor, we set up a husky tow and dragged our canoe behind us as we plodded steadily towards the now visible collection of buildings that form Britain's most remote railway station. At last, early evening saw us at our destination, a little less than 9 hours after departing Kinlochleven. We were tired, hungry, muddy, and delighted. We had crossed Rannoch Moor in fine style and could now look forward to the long system of lochs and rivers that descend towards Perth and the east coast of Scotland. Moreover, Rannoch station offered the prospect of an immediate return to civilization, with the solitary hotel clearly open for business. "Beer o'clock?" Matt mused as we surveyed our options. There was no need to ask me twice. We came to a disappointed halt at the hotel entrance, a sign on the door clearly stating that the bar was open only to residents and dining guests. I was more than willing to throw some cash at the problem, and persuaded Matt that a Highland culinary experience was our best choice at this juncture. We strolled in, the warm surroundings confirming the wisdom of our choice. However, the approaching waiter gave off an unwelcoming air as he blocked our route to the bar. My request for a table for two was met with the frankly unbelievable reply: the restaurant was fully booked for that night. I glanced at a handful of diners scattered around the expansive surroundings, considered the immense effort required by any would-be clients to reach this end-of-the-road wilderness eatery, and expressed disbelief that a meal could not be whistled up by the clearly underemployed kitchen staff. Our bad news waiter was having none of it, and within seconds we found ourselves back outside in the cold west wind. For us at least, business hours were over. Our spirits sagged. After such a successful day, we felt cheated of our reward and suddenly sought out a sheltered spot to heat up our rations. Curious to explore the deserted railway station in its incongruous position at the moor's edge, I crossed the footbridge and wandered the platform to savour the atmosphere. Arriving outside the station cafe, I could not help but reach out a hand, grasp the handle, and test the door. To my amazement and delight, it swung open to reveal a warm dining area, a kettle with tea bags, snacks, and an honesty box. Trousering a Tunnock's tea cake, I dashed back to alert Matt to my great discovery. While savouring a rehydrated supper in our newfound shelter, an intriguing thought occurred to me. A review of the platform timetable confirmed my suspicion. In a mere 20 minutes, the only train of the night, the Highland sleeper to London, would pull in. I waited excitedly for its arrival, startled at the sudden appearance of my previously hidden train-spotting enthusiasm. Was this my future, I wondered, waiting on windswept platforms with a gaggle of bearded, bespectacled loners, scribbling locomotive serial numbers into a meticulously ordered notebook? As the train squealed and shuddered to a halt, the uniformed guard hopped out, with whom Matt immediately entered an intense conversation. Sauntering over, I realised that he was negotiating an alcohol purchase from the train bar. I could scarcely believe this fabulous turn of events as I hunted through jacket pockets for my stash of Scottish banknotes. The guard disappeared into the carriage and shortly returned with an expression that warned us to brace for yet more disappointment. The train manager had apparently refused to authorise the sale of off-train liquor consumption, thus scuppering our wilderness booze up. Outraged at the actions of this joyless Jobsworth, I watched in disgust as the night sleeper rattled off down the track towards London. Dejected, we pitched camp and turned in for the night as the sun disappeared over the silent moor. By 7 a.m, we were en route once more, having completed our first desperate midge dance of the trip, packing frantically as the ferocious microscopic beasts savaged any exposed skin. Seeking refuge afloat, we navigated Kinlochleven, the Gargoyle River, and Loch Agach until the dam wall at the head of the River Gower forced us ashore. Tarmac and trolley combined perfectly as we hummed downstream to the more navigable sections of the river, and eventually the head of Loch Rannoch. Under clear blue skies and with a strengthening westerly wind, we hoisted our rig once more and began an exciting downwind sail, surfing white horses as we ate up the distance to Kinlochleven. Powering along at almost 10k, we covered the 18 kilometres of open water in fine style. Once again, I was reminded of our differing experiences afloat as I gazed apprehensively into the trough of each wave, convinced that we would bury, swamp and sink. Helming our craft from the security of the stern, Matt seemed entirely unconcerned at my timidity as we shaped a course down the centre of the loch, while I tried not to imagine the long swim to the bank with flooded wellies. Ashore in Kinlochleven, we plotted our options over a cafe Americano and concluded that Pitlochry might lie within reach that day. Afloat again, we followed the upper river Tummel down to Dunalister Loch and weaved a route through partly submerged grassy islets until the narrowing rocky hillsides funneled our helpful breeze ever stronger. Portaging once more, we trolleyed down to Tummel Bridge and the final large loch of our journey, 15 kilometres of Loch Tummel. Again, we enjoyed fantastic sailing conditions, and by early evening found ourselves beached once more at the east end of the loch. We trolleyed along the minor road past the whitewater stretch of the Tummel below the Clooney Dam, Matt limping gingerly as his injured ankle protested painfully. A final flatwater paddle took us to Pitlochry, where we arrived 13 hours after our departure from Rannoch Station. With 58 kilometres of loch, river and portage under our hull, we were elated with our progress and wasted no time checking into the Pitlochry backpackers. This excellent establishment was the perfect end to an amazing day of memorable open canoeing. A conveniently located curry house and its neighbouring pub brought the evening to a hazy and contented close. The following day, our mid-morning departure required us to navigate the now busy Pitlochry High Street to reach our put-in. To Matt's evident amusement, my tired impatience with dawdling tourists threatened to spill over as we weaved and slalomed our 17-foot canoe through the wandering throngs. By the time we reached the riverbank, my frazzled state was only enhanced by my agonisingly full bladder. Having overhydrated at the hostel, I now found myself overwhelmed with panic on the crowded footpath, every otherwise secluded bushy corner sporting groups of holidaying tourists. At immediate risk of swamping, I brazenly relieved myself in full view of a picnicking family, leapt into the bow seat and urged Matt to get us out of there. We paddled swiftly down the lower river Tummel, slaloming between anglers to the confluence with the Tay. With the water release from the Clooney Dam, our speed through the Class 1 and 2 water was swift and easy. Onto the fast-flowing Tay, we continued to enjoy a series of simple rapids as the river hurried us south towards our destination. We pulled off at Dunkeld for a break before knuckling down to a final sustained stroke session, grinding out the miles and determined to make a decent fist of our final aquatic challenge. The afternoon brought harder work and a renewed sense of tiredness as the lower reaches of the Tay eased to a seemingly endless series of gentle meanders. The dramatic highland views were replaced by pastoral lowland scenery as fields of livestock drifted slowly past. To our outrage, a headwind materialised, forcing us to dig deep yet again. At last, the rocky barrier of Campsie Lynn appeared, the signal of the start to a few kilometres of Class 2+ rapids, down through Stanley Weir and on towards Perth. Shipping water in a couple of the larger wave trains, we whooped our way downstream, enjoying the final challenge of this grand cross-Scotland adventure. Eager to capture the action, I lay down in the bow of the boat as Matt steered us through the biggest water of the entire trip. Snapping away with my camera, disaster almost struck as, despite Matt's desperate edging, water gushed in over the canoe's submerged rim. Buried in the final wave train, a bucket full of the taste squirted down the neck of my paddling jacket, while Matt wailed away with a flurry of panicked strokes. Drenched and shivering, we emptied out and continued downstream. Thankfully, we had finished off the worst of the rapids and could relax at last. Well into the evening, after an interminable flatwater toil, the city of Perth appeared. Our arrival at the tidal limit marked the end of our journey, 140 kilometres after leaving Kinlochleven. As a cold drizzle fell from the sky, we trudged wearily but happily towards our campsite, relieved that we would soon be spared any further paddling or portaging. 250 kilometres and 8 days after leaving the west coast fishing village of Mallaig, after crossing the entire Scottish Highlands on foot, under sail and by paddle power, we had completed our grand canoe odyssey. Exhausted but satisfied, it was time to go home.